Hey neighbors, the handyman here with Initiative Coffee Company, along with the Serpent of Rama himself, Jake Del Maro, and today we're talking about DDEX-02-08 Foulness beneath Mulmaster. Writer Tim Egan, editors Claire Hoffman, Chris Tulech, and Travis Woodall. This is a 4-hour mod for Tier 1 play, tuned probably for 5 third-level characters, but there's a typo, so there's not really any real way to know. There's substantial combat with a whelming puzzle, I guess. We'll get to that. The party is being conscripted into the service of Mulmaster by Sergeant Masker. The module features a flump and the sewer plague. So if you're looking for fart monsters, this is the one for you. Part 1, Into the Sewers. The body. The remains of a vaguely jellyfish-like creature was found by several children in a pipe from the sewers. The party can investigate the location and the children, but either way they find clues that lead back into the sewers. The sewers are well known to be a haven for villains and monsters. Soon after entering the sewers, the party encounters another group of adventurers on the same mission that are convinced the sewers are haunted. A disembodied voice keeps asking them for help. First contact, there are no ghosts. The voice is a flump. It's the mate of the one that washed out of the pipe earlier in the adventure. There are, however, Lacedons. Meeting La'al. After the party handles the undead problem, the flump La'al greets them more directly. The two flumps had been trailing troglodytes to a man that was commanding another creature. La'al's companion tried to confront the man and was killed immediately. Starting this off, what are the high points, the low points here in part 1, Jake?
This one is kind of interesting in the fact that adventure hooks are kind of irrelevant. Like, I don't like making stuff irrelevant, but like this point, it's like they're titled "I Am the Law" or "Oi, Mister, you hear the news." Like, I just kind of put it. I don't know. I'm still gonna push and push and push. Just use Mr. Saj or someone and be like, hey, or even from the last adventure where you had the gentleman from the, or not last adventure, a few adventures ago from the keep, like he put in a good word and he said that you were trustworthy and you could get your job done. That's how Masker finds you. That would be a good way of introing it.
The idea of like conscription seems like it is infuriating to players, to be frank. I don't like the notion of like forcing players' hands. The idea of this is like, let's make them feel like it's their idea. It also takes away the need for role play when you say like, oh, you're doing this because I'm making you do it. It's the kind of the most railroady of railroads.
I mean, voluntelling is always a fun thing to do.
Sure.
But what you can do in that same regards is they highlighted in the like description. It's like 12 members show up. It is a hot day in Mulmaster. Yeah. Hot season. It really be like uncomfortable, but they're treating you to a level of respect. They're like, hey, let's go to the shade.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? You're worth the shade.
Sure.
And like the other guys that are the soldiery, or I guess it would be the city watch, are clearly not worth it, but Masker thinks you are. Mm-hmm. So I think that giving it a level of, if that's the way you go down, of saying, hey, it was a recommendation by another person in the city watch, I think that is a cleaner way of doing it, exactly like opposite of, conscription. It's like, hey, I'm kind of volunteering you to do this, but like, you know what? We're going to give you the illusion of freedom here.
Yeah, and I think like if you can't get past it with the kind of like super controlled nature of gold in the current system, like just have him offer to pay the party the gold cap.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like at some point, like it doesn't matter where the gold is coming from anymore because there's a fixed amount of gold by and large in AL mods now. So other than that, I know
there's good info here.
Yeah,
there's a lot of important info that Masker has, and it kind of sets up that weird, like, what is this? Because it's like, is it a jellyfish or is it an octopus? And something that's not really noted, like, immediately is that they have the body. Mm-hmm. Like, I think it might be like an overthought or underthought maybe thing, because it goes from into the sewers straight to the body, but there's no mention unless you are aware of it. So it could come off a little rough.
Mm-hmm.
But they have the body of Zol, the mate of Lao.
Right.
That is a huge source of info, and there's a lot of descriptions there that emphasizes the current environment in Mulmaster, which is obnoxiously hot.
Mm-hmm. There's also a lot of opportunity for like different kinds of checks here, which I like.
Yep.
There's history, there's arcana, there's medicine, there's, I don't know. This is really a situation where like you can do kind of whatever you want in terms of checks if you can defend them appropriately. Yep. And frankly, I think almost anything goes in this situation, right? I mean, it's a weird monster that is not often seen. So I don't know. I have my own like kind of ambivalent feelings about flumps in general, but
that they're amazing.
I think they lean into every negative stereotype of gamers in the 90s, like the notion of like stinky fart monsters that like hide in sewers.
That's
like
aggressive.
I think it's a little on the nose in terms of like negative stereotypes that I at least lived through. I don't know about most gamers, but I'm probably reading too much into it, but who knows?
You know what? It's up for interpretation. If that's how you interpret it, that's great.
Yeah.
I do not gonna fight that one, but there's interesting information here also before the sewers. You can get to an investigation with the children, which kind of has a mini flavor in itself.
Mm-hmm.
You get to play up being a kid. Nothing crazy here, nothing that I would go like wowzers for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the next part, you're going into the sewers. Sewers are mimicking that of the streets of Mulmaster. Nothing crazy here. You do have an introduction of a very interesting disease.
Yeah.
It's not directly stated. If one of the creatures bites, I immediately make a Mega Con save, because that reinforces how dangerous this thing is. I mean, you're getting bitten by like,
it's dangerous. It's filthy.
It's a walking tetanus shot. Like,
I mean, it makes sense that like if this thing that like has been sleeping in sewer sludge bites you, like you might get sewer plague. It's named after the stuff it sleeps in. So
yeah,
I like that. I'm on board with that. In terms of like meeting a flump, cool, I guess. Lacedons are basically aquatic ghouls. Ghouls. Yeah, I mean it can be a tough challenge for low level parties, but
I feel like everything's pretty straightforward here.
Yeah, it's a pretty good introductory combat. The only like big game changer here is that disease. And
we're getting paralyzed and dragged. That stuff. One bad roll could spell disaster for someone. Yeah. So like, it is a dangerous fight to a degree. I mean, it's a DC something save. I can't remember. Mm-hmm. It's below 13, I believe. But
probably a 12. That's pretty standard.
Yeah. So like, if that happens, the fight's gonna change drastically.
And that could very feasibly happen for first level characters, second level characters. I guess like the only thing to keep in mind is your players also have the opportunity to contract a plague anytime they're under half of their maximum hit points.
Yep.
And that's per hour they're in the sewers, I believe. So that's another thing to kind of manage and keep track of in terms of administration for your players. But I think it's one that like you should have a general idea of anyway as a DM, especially at tier 1. So
yeah,
I don't think it's too much to ask. Anyway, part 2, the outer tomb. The entrance tunnel, the bandit camp, and the barricade. The cult of the crashing wave has been set up camp in one of the sewers tunnels. The camp is led by Zaxxon Tevish, and the party is in for a challenging fight. Tevish is a Cult of Fire member who is consulting with the Cult of the Wave. It's not real. He's working with them. The cultists will use what terrain and preparations they've established to gain as much advantage as possible. Once they enter the antechamber, the rooms are inhabited by what troglodytes remain from the Flumph trying to fight them off. So when we go in here, I think it's pretty straightforward. If not, it's a bit more challenging than typical like bandits attack you on the road, because there's a lot of fortifications here they can use. There's reinforcements. I would say like let your players be creative in terms of like getting as much preparation done on their own account. I know when we played, like the players enlisted the Flumph to use its telepathy to like instill chaos in the members of the cults. Definitely like allow for role playing and exploration here if your players are going to be engaged in it. If not, they're in for a tough fight. It's not a small amount of cultists. Tevish is pretty stout in terms of his stat block. It'll be a rough couple of probably. I mean, you're probably looking at 40 minutes, I would say, for this combat. So
a big thing for this is there is options for roleplay here where they can parlay and actually get into the camp, which gives a bit more color into the actual reason why they're there, like from punishment to whatever it may be. To be very clear here, it's almost better for your party to address these guys now, because if they don't, they will get their back stabbed in the troglodyte fight. After the troglodytes, then you have like they'll be like, oh, you cleared him out, stab, and that is a very tough thing to deal with, because troglodytes are are one-hit wonders kind of thing where they just do a boatload of damage.
Yeah.
The crushing wave reavers are also a boatload of damage.
Yeah.
If you have a monk, you have a druid, someone not wearing armor, they deal a lot of damage.
And they're not pushovers.
They're not pushovers in the slightest.
They're not 2 hit points. They're not like the troglodytes. The troglodytes here are a lot like minions from 4th edition, where they have all of the stat block of a real creature, but 1 hit point. So all you have to do is like something to deal with them, and then they'll be gone. We've run some of Princes of the Apocalypse before. We're gonna jump back into that again after we kind of get through some of this season 2 stuff. I really like the cultists of the wave. I think they have really cool, iconic kind of accoutrements to go with them, like the idea of like a shark tooth longsword. I think is a really cool, neat idea. It has its own abilities that are relevant. You know, if it hits you and you're unarmored, it deals a ton of extra damage. I think that's neat. I think it's a cool effect that doesn't come up very often. Throwing in the fire cultist is kind of a misdirect or a red herring here. Not really sure how it fits in. Maybe it's just because like we didn't really do a lot of socializing with them before we just kind of like came up with strategies to deal with them.
Two parts about that. The Flumph, if the party starts negotiating, will break down negotiations rapidly because Zol was killed by these guys.
Sure.
So like there is a very limited track of information that probably should be acquired if that were to happen. And as such, it is like, you know, you only get so much. The other thing to note, this is one of the first times that I can recall where you actually can get like a piece of jewelry that directly has like Imix's symbol, or like, you know, there's like old Hydra and all that.
Sure.
Like the cultist here, Davish, does carry something that is Imix, and your party can do a check to find out, you know, what it is.
Yeah.
And I do think that's really neat. In the seasonality that is now with, you know, you get X amount of gold. It definitely brings up a lot more of a point of, hey, what kind of cool treasure do I have? Hey, do I have a long, like, though we're not going to transfer all the abilities over of a shark tooth longsword, you know, can I replace my current, you know, longsword if I have a +1 longsword and just like say it's a +1 longsword and be like the shark tooth one?
Aesthetically, can I use this as my weapon? Yeah,
that is half the battle. And also a place where you can grab, I think this is a place where you can grab cloaks from different factions. I mean, I mentioned that prior, but there is a time when I think that if my players said, hey, I've got these different cloaks, can we use them? Yeah, absolutely.
It's a cool way to engage your players in ways that aren't about like the things that the number of things that they get, the mechanics of the things they get.
Yeah.
Like being able to come out and say like these are the cool aspects I have is a really fun way to like engage those players in ways that aren't just about this is a +1 weapon, this is 80 gold pieces, this is Staff of the War Mage, or Wand of the War Mage, whatever, and kind of get them engaged in this story.
Yeah.
I will say that like if you want to throw in information about Imix in earlier mods, go for it. You know,
Yeah.
like it's not. I think one of the weaknesses of the prior mods is that there isn't enough discussion of like, why are these cults here? What are they doing? Who are they? Like, should we be concerned about them, or are they just fanatics, in like a neutered kind of nebulous way?
Yeah.
And I think like having an icon there that like you could take back to a wizard and they could tell you like, oh no, this is bad news,
Yeah.
is cool from like episode 1, right? From right off the get, you could do iconography that is gonna compel your players to get more engaged in
Absolutely.
the overall story beyond just them knowing that it has to do with season 2, right?
Yeah.
Part 3, the inner tomb. The outer vault houses a puzzle with no real answer. Ultimately, the party will have to fight off a water wheel to solve the puzzle by putting the water from the nearby pool into funnels in the puzzle door. Interacting with the pool causes a water wheel to attack. The inner vault, solving the puzzle, the party enters a room that is mostly submerged in water with skeletal Quatoa attacking characters on a limited dry terrain that's available. Across the water is a small rocky island with a sarcophagus. Swimming in the water starts combat with 2 swarms of quippers. The goal is presumably to get there. I have real problems with puzzles that don't have solutions. I think when you put a puzzle in a module or in an adventure, the consequence of failure should be combat, as like a secondary way to solve the puzzle. I don't like the notion that like the way to solve this puzzle is to fight a thing, because it just seems like it's not a puzzle at that point.
Sure.
It seems like it's a puzzle for the sake of like pretending there's a puzzle in this module, not so much to like challenge your players in that different kind of like critical thinking way rather than just dice rolling.
Yeah. I feel like it's a pretty easy layup. I agree with you on that regards. I think there should, like, the part that annoys me is like you put in, so like the party was like, I've got a wine skill, or I got a water canteen or whatever. They pour water in, and then everyone in a 15-foot cone does a dex save plus acid damage, and it's like, cool,
right,
awesome. So that
and
gets
like,
a little out of hand.
I don't mind consequences for failing the puzzle, right? Like,
but
if
no,
they want,
it's like a one-on-one thing. It was just like everyone's out there, and you get hit, and it's like, okay, cool. I just got hit with the dragon's breath.
Yeah, I guess my big concern is like the way to solve this puzzle requires you to like do non-puzzle things, right?
Yeah.
And it just seems, I don't know, lackluster in terms of like puzzles, but
I think it's a neat puzzle.
A neat puzzle. I just don't like the consequence of like succeeding in this puzzle means this arbitrary combat. I like maybe like there are water skins there that have cult insignias on them, and you have to use those water skins to move the pool water to the funnels in the door. And if you don't use those particular water skins, it summons the water weird. That seems like at least a way to get through it that doesn't involve
your 8th combat
weird, your 8th combat before another combat.
Yeah.
Maybe like if you have the shape water cantrip and can move the water from the pool to the funnels without touching it, right? Maybe there's a way to solve the puzzle that way. Shape water is a pretty rare spell in terms of AL. I think like Water Genasi get it, and that's and otherwise you have to be out of Elemental Evil Player's Guide to get access to it.
Yeah.
So I mean that causes limitations. I would find a way to solve this puzzle that doesn't rely on a fight with a water weird and uses that as a backstop if they fail.
Yeah. Makes sense.
In terms of the inner vault, Yeah, I don't know. Like the Quatoa skeletons, they have like long grabby
I think they're
staves. They're
cool.
cool. Yeah, I think they're really neat.
There's no apex to this entire mod,
Yeah.
and like I don't necessarily mind that. Like
I
I
mean,
don't
there
mind it
is
being
the
like a
apex is
capstone.
the capstone here is the bandit fight, right? Is the cultist fight, and
Yeah.
everything else is
So
kind of downhill from there, in terms
yeah,
of like challenge. But I think it's interesting stuff, right?
yeah. It's not putting random demons in an elemental,
Right.
kind of situation. I mean, of course, everyone goes, "Aha! I found the main bad guy. Time to unload everything."
Mhm.
But like the fact that this is just like a constant, like 7.5, and not necessarily ramping up to a 10.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing.
I don't
Like
either.
because realistically, the Kyotoa, they are supposed to pincer you, drop you into the water after you get grappled, and Quippers start eating everything.
Yeah.
But like, if they can't hit, then it's like you fighting a skeleton
Right.
with a little bit of extra hit points. But
And
like,
reach. I mean, the reach is pretty, I guess, meaningful as well. I don't know. Like, I think there's enough here that it just like feels like a natural sewer terrain, right? Like, it's possible that there are skeletons in a sewer. It's possible that there are quippers in a sewer.
this one's more of a large, like it's clearly a vault.
Like a
It's not.
cistern, yeah.
This is like away from
Yeah,
the sewer.
that's true.
Um,
Yeah, I don't know. I think like I don't mind this combat. I think like it's a lot of combat in this mod.
yeah.
But other than
You can
that,
get lost in combat
you
here.
can. It's easy.
But I do have to say, this is kind of, I did highlight this on the last message on 2-7, I believe, was my enjoyment of getting a magic item that directly impacts the
Sure.
following mod. If
Yeah.
somebody has a Ring of Water Walk, the entire puzzle/trap that is you jumping across wooden planks or wooden
Is
things
irrelevant.
becomes irrelevant.
Yeah.
And like back when this was written, only one would drop. Now like a
Right.
bajillion of them drop, but it still requires like a choice.
You to make
Hey,
that
do I
choice,
want?
yeah.
Yeah, like now
And it's
you
here
have
when
to
you
have
get one
only,
magic item, so
Yeah.
it means you have to have the ring of water walking and nothing else. So
and that is super cool.
Yeah.
And like you can go over and you find like the Kuotoa shaman,
Yeah.
woohoo, and it's not alive, which still doesn't make sense to me. But like it is what it is,
Sure.
and there's a lot of cool mechanics in this room with the pool spinning and everything. But I don't think I've ever gotten to the point where it's like people are just suddenly now jumping across these platforms without dealing with the skeletons first. I think it
Yeah.
seems kind of backwards, and I would, if I was a player at the table and someone started doing that like without like a stop button on that platform, I would be like, you're just being annoying.
I mean, the other thing to think about here is that your mission was to deal with the cultists and
Yeah.
potentially also the troglodytes. So realistically, like, you could be done before you even deal with the puzzle, right? Like, your players have finished their goal. And, like, I know we harp on this a lot, but, like, the notion of, like, when you're in a mod, sticking to the mission at hand, right? Well, your mission at hand was to deal with cultists and troglodytes. You've
Yeah.
dealt with those. If your players aren't inspired to deal with this puzzle, there's no reason, there's no like narrative reason that they need to beyond their own curiosity at this point.
Exactly.
So I don't know that, I don't know that this is kind of like a bonus round, I guess.
And then at the end, if you get on that island, I forgot about it, you can get Blessed Lungs Curse, where you just start dying.
It's just like the aboleth mucus ability.
It's literally you just start
It's like, oh,
dying.
you need to be underwater or you'll drown.
Which I guess is cool, but like I haven't necessarily like ran it because people, I don't know.
There's just not a lot of ways to deal with it at low levels.
It'd be different
right?
if it was like, part of the main platform where the Kuotoa had that, but they don't.
Mhm.
It's only triggered when you touch the lid.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't know.
I like it.
Sure. Yeah, it's a
can't
cool
use it.
curse. It's just
Can't use it.
there are frustratingly few ways to deal with it at 4th level, right? Like your paladins, your druids, your clerics don't have remove curse yet. So
Yeah.
there's not a lot of tools to solve that, and
Minus
you're just
con
basically
saves.
killing character, right? Like if they don't have a good con save to begin with, they're just not going to make it.
They do get some background info, and they get an Ol Hydra symbol.
Mhm.
Then you get a +1 Rod of the Pack Keep, which is like an awesome item, but only warlocks can use it. So
The other thing you get is a story reward that's not listed as a story reward, right? Like if you complete this favor for Lao, she'll tell other
yeah,
flumps that that you're cool.
yeah.
Um,
So that's something that is very cool. It's like she spreads words of the character's deeds amongst people, and next time they're in Underdark, Flemps attempt to honor their debt. And like this has happened a few times, but there's only like 4 mods that Flumps are actually incorporated in. There's
and
like a
all
tier
of Adventures, yeah,
yeah,
they're
like
pretty rare.
it's so thin, and like one of them's a tier 3 mod, and
One of
it
them's an
actually
AO, like
but the thing is that tier 3 mod, it's like once you get further and further in, some of them will ask, hey, have you played this adventure?
mhm,
And if you have, they recognize you,
right.
which I'm like sitting here going, I love story awards, I love story awards.
It's
But then
disappointing that they didn't script the story reward into the module.
yeah,
It's kind of a bummer that they didn't like explicitly label that, and so you're just like constantly searching for this module in future mods.
yeah,
Like you as a DM don't necessarily have the power to like declare a story reward here, but like if you're the one running the table, like I would lean into it.
I tell them, I say, hey, make sure you write this down.
Yeah,
That Flumps know who
I
you
ran
are.
2-8. Flumps know I'm a big deal.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. Yeah, other than that, I think it's a pretty straightforward mod. Other than like my own personal qualms about like flumps being like this silly focal point of a module, and my issues with the puzzle, it's it's solid, I guess.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be like a top 10 in terms of like if I were to make a list one day, but it's definitely not the bottom either. Final thoughts.
It earns itself firmly in the middle, and
Yeah.
I'm okay with it because it's got a lot of combat, but there's a lot of info.
Mhm.
I think my big takeaway is like it is a slog, but
It's a lot
like
of combat.
but it's not like you feel good afterwards. I think that's
Yeah.
the thing. Like you're like, oh yeah, I killed that.
It's kind of nice that the end combats are substantially less
Yeah.
like aggressive, because it gives you that nice like, oh my god, this was super challenging. We're halfway through the module, and then it's kind of like a break for the rest of the mod, right? You don't have to be like anxious about hit points or anything. I guess like the quippers and the skeletons can get challenging if they get challenging, but
It feels like a very much of like the Skyrim kind of thing where you fought up the mountain fighting bears and everything. It's super difficult, and then you like walk into like the cave and it's like you hear the creaking of skeletons. You're like, oh, this is gonna be easy.
right. It's like 3 Beauregard in the whole place. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you just like you just run through them, and you're like,
it's just like, oh yeah, I already cleared this one out. Okay.
yeah, okay, this is tough. Same kind of concept. It's like it's an ancient burial ground, and they're like, well, this clearly hasn't leveled appropriately,
Right.
and like you just run through it. And I think like that is definitely a concept I do like. Yeah, it's nice fighting like something that's like got legendary actions, but like as a DM, I'll just say it's nice not having to worry about like what does this guy do differently than others, and then see
what is
having
extra.
to juggle it.
Yeah.
So I do give it it's probably in the top 50 of adventures. I've run a bajillion adventures, but like I would definitely say this is not a
it's definitely a good mod for a tier 1 mod.
Yeah,
right. I know there's a lot of like really weak tier 1 mods, and that's not like a cut again. It's part of that is the nature of tier 1. But I think it's a pretty solid tier 1 mod. Obviously, if you're playing with all first level characters, things can go south very quickly.
I wouldn't run that mod.
I wouldn't run this mod for first level characters.
I'd run it for 3s and 4s.
Yeah. And I guess that's the only other issue is like I don't know what it's targeted for, because there's a typo in the administrative text of the mod saying it's a tier 2 mod when it just isn't. So I don't know. Anyway, so there it is, DDEX-02-08 Foulness beneath Mulmaster. Thank you so much for taking some time to hear some advice on how to streamline and run it at your tables. Be a good neighbor, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon. From now until the next time, roll together.